Hey everybody, Ugly Shader here with another YouTube video tutorial. And that's right, it's time for lesson 2. Now, I'll warn you right off the bat, lesson 2 is technically going to be like entirely different than lesson 1. And that's because in lesson 1 we covered the very beginnings of basically how to control the way the dots on your material, on your object or whatever look. Now in lesson 2, we're, basically we're going to be covering the other half of procedural textures. Now, getting the dot, its color, its brightness, the pattern that you want for your material, that's only half the battle. Well, technically in some situations that's only a third of the battle. But we're not going to worry about those situations. We'll save that for lesson 3. But for now, yeah, your textures are normally going to be comprised of two distinctive halves. You'll have the half, which is the the color and the brightness and everything like that, your pattern that you created. And then you'll have the other half. Well, for any, good material, well, I guess I can't say good. I can imagine a few situations in which uh, it wouldn't be necessary, whether, because the object is so far away you wouldn't be able to tell, or in certain like toon shading situations in which you wouldn't want it. However, most materials will have a second quality to them aside from just their appearance, that pattern that you created, however you chose to create it with your nodes and stuff. And that's what today's lesson is going to be about. So all I have right here is an empty scene. I mean, I don't even have a camera. I should probably add a lamp. Let's throw a sun lamp in there and make it like strength of 3, and we'll just rotate it on the x-axis a bit so that it's, sitting at an angle. That way we just have a little bit of light casting through our scene. And let's go ahead and give ourselves a brighter environment that, again, I kind of like that kind of light grayish blue. It's kind of soft on the eyes. Alright, so we need an object in our environment to have a material on so that we can even figure out what we're going to be doing. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a plane and scale it up to about the size of our grid floor. Alright, so here's our plane, and last time we came in and we just played around with the different ways we could put a pattern on something, the different ways we could manipulate the image itself of the texture. And when I say that's only like half the texture, that's because most rendering engines and a lot of the game engines, especially that any newer games are made in, have programming that allows them to, in a sense, kind of fake the appearance of depth. False displacement, if you will. Now, true displacement, which Blender can do, however, we're not going to be covering true displacement in this episode. It requires turning on the experimental feature set and changing a setting in a different portion for each of the materials you want to use it on, or the objects anyways. But true displacement is the actual manipulation of the mesh. Displacement in general should technically mean the manipulation of the mesh. So, for instance, if I were to come in, and I'm actually going to raise that up a pinch, I don't like being able to see the grid floor through it, and I'm too lazy to turn the floor off. Anyways, so if I were to come in here and subdivide this up a bit, let's say 10 cuts, actual displacement, true displacement, or technically any form of displacement, should actually mean the actual manipulation of the mesh. I am currently displacing this mesh. So true displacement, in a sense, allows you to use your texture to change the shape of your mesh. However, it's got some drawbacks. I mean, it's okay for for rendering and stuff like that for just a still image or even some animations and things. However, unfortunately, true displacement means that the quality of your displaced object depends on the number of vertices, the manipulated count for polygons that you have on your object. So as you can imagine, something that's, say, this big that would be like bumpy like dirt is going to have a lot of vertices in it. And unfortunately, because of that, it can be really demanding on system resources, really putting your processor and GPU through the paces. Or unfortunately, in a lot of situations, your scene just gets so big because you have so many vertices and your textures are complex that now it's just out of the range of your video card. In 2.8, I'm pretty sure they're trying to get it set up so that your system memory can like support your GPU memory, so that if your scene requires more than the available memory in your GPU stack, you can use system memory to compensate without just having a failure, which will be really cool. But I'm also expecting it to have an effect on the rate at which you can process a scene. Anyhow, what game engines use and what Blender can also use is fake displacement, false displacement, not actually manipulating the surface of the mesh, however, playing with the way that the material looks and how the material reacts to light to make it look very convincingly, I might add, like there's actual changes in the geometry of the mesh. So everything we're going to be doing is just on this 100% flat plane. It only has 4 vertices. If we wanted to displace it, there's only so much we can do, because yeah, there's only 4 points that we could manipulate. There's nothing in the middle here. So we couldn't technically like actually bend this mesh really if we wanted to without having to add more vertices. Thankfully, that doesn't matter. Now, there's 2 traditional methods for achieving displacement. One of them is through like normal maps and bump and stuff like that, which is what a lot of game engines use. Like if you go to Unreal Engine or Unity to build a game out of characters and textures you've used, you'll use a traditional diffuse or the base texture, and you'll load that up into an image editor and generate what they refer to as image maps. A normal map, a specular map, ambient occlusion map, or not diffuse, but roughness map, a metalness map, and basically these are all just different versions of the same image that communicate certain bits of information to your render engine or your game engine to tell it how it's supposed to display those textures, how they should react with the light, and any information it may need so that it can kind of cheat the system and make them look like they're not two-dimensional. The way we will be achieving it, instead of with normal maps and everything like that, is we will be creating our own images from within inside Blender. And basically, it's all going to follow the same principles as what we did in episode 1 as far as creating a pattern. However, we're then going to use that pattern as a numerical bit of information, our 0 to 1's values, and we're going to come over here and feed it into the displacement node on our material output. And then you may also notice we have this volume one right here. That's that occasional your material is comprised of thirds instead of halves that we'll get to next episode. For now, though, we'll just think of our material as having 2 halves. It's the surface, which for now represents the way these dots look. Each and every dot that comprises the appearance of this image. Its color information, its brightness, and whatever characteristics it carries. Right now, we just have a diffuse BSDF shader, so we have a flat, matte, white color. But as we covered in the last episode, if we were to switch that out for a glossy shader, we'd have a more metallic reflective surface, a glossy surface. Or we could switch it out for, a glass shader or a translucent shader and make it see-through and have various properties. That's what's handled by our shader. That determines its characteristics. And then everything behind that just determines, what kind of pattern and appearance that will be given these characteristics before being displayed on the screen. all of the theories and principles that we're going to use in this are generally the same. And because of the understanding of the white, black, 0, 1 scale and stuff like that, you'll find that displacement can be just as powerful, if not more powerful, than the actual texture itself that you've created. The appearance of depth that you add to it has a lot of potential, I guess you could say. So, to express that potential, what we're going to be doing today is our material is just going to be white. Well, we're going to go kind of a cream color. Basically, we're going to be making a textured ceiling. You know, like when you look up in your room or in your house, how there's generally, well, in a lot of houses, there's a particular almost kind of hanging texture on the ceiling. Well, there's not really a lot of color or pattern going on in that, it's just texture itself. So that's what we're going to be creating, only we're not going to be adding geometry to our object to do it. We're simply going to be creating it with false displacement, just manipulating the way the light hits the surface in order to fake the appearance of detail, of depth. And again, it can be very, very convincing depending upon how you do it. So here we have it, just a plain, flat, white plane. Well, the first thing we're going to do is try adjusting its displacement. Try adding something to that to affect this input so that it's represented on our material. And yeah, we're just going to leave this white diffuse shader up here. That's good enough for us for now, just a plain white color. Everything we're going to do is pretty much right here. All right, so just like last time when we wanted to get, patterns and stuff like that going on, let's grab us a texture. And let's grab a noise texture. Now, just to remember, what this texture looks like, if it's the color input, we get just this color smear. And if it's the factor, we get just noise, just a black-white mixture, mostly gray. Well, if we bring that down here and plug this into our displacement, as you can see, there's not much to be seen. And unfortunately, not only is that because it's very weak, or whatnot, I don't have the sun at the sharpest angle. The sharper your angle of your sun is, the more it'll react with the appearance of fake depth you put on. So if I press X and actually move that to a steeper angle, and then we come back and look at it, now you can actually see it's almost starting to look like there's little spots here and there that are shadowed just ever so slightly more, almost like our plane has a wrinkle to it. Unfortunately, that's not good enough. We can't see that well enough to really be able to understand what's going on. Oops, I'm on my sun. Let's go back to my plane. So yeah, we can't see that very well, or well enough to really be able to tell what's going on. The easiest way to be able to get a better idea of what's going on will be to increase its contrast. And just like we did in episode 1 to basically tighten up the difference between white and black in one of those textures, we can still use that same method. So let's grab us a color ramp and plug this in here. And then we can tighten this up like this. And as you can see, now we obviously have something going on our plane here. Now, the way this is currently represented, let me do a quick slide to make sure. Yep. All right, the way it's currently showing up is this side of our scale are black, and we can tighten this back up so we can see it better. This black is representing the portion of our mesh that is tall. The white is currently representing the portion of our mesh that is low, and the gray space in between the two of them is our transition right here from the low to high. And I say currently because there's a lot of things we can do that'll actually change what is high and what is low on our mesh. What's the normal level of the mesh and what looks like it's either sticking up from or sunk down into the mesh. A lot of things can change that, including this color ramp. But we will get to that in just a moment. First things first, though, let's just see what we got going on here. We literally have this almost looks like it's, well, yeah, it's 3D. It's no longer a flat looking object. However, it is actually 100% flat. If we get close and get down kind of right beside it, you can kind of start to tell that there is actually no depth right here. It simply changed the appearance of the object and the way it's shadowed and the way it's highlighted and everything like that to make it look like there's depth. We go, oop, not tab. We go back to our normal plane view, and yeah, there's nothing there. We don't have any vertices that we could perform this kind of mesh manipulation with anyways. Actually, that's a pretty good angle to make it look flat. But yeah, so it's not actually producing any depth. It's just the way that the engine manipulates how the light hits it, how much light bounces back off, so on and so forth. That's what gives it this fake appearance of depth. And that's why this is generally the other half of any average, standard, or good material. You have the pattern, what something looks like, but you also have the appearance of depth in the material. So it doesn't look completely flat. So it actually has a 3D or more realistic appearance to it. So that's kind of the basis behind pretty much everything in displacement. You're simply playing with those 0, 1, those negative, positive, those up, down values to manipulate the way the render engine or game engine looks at the material, thus faking depth. Now again, this is false displacement. This is just bump. True displacement will actually manipulate the shape and size and everything like that of the object, the mesh itself. But again, that means that you need vertices for everywhere the mesh needs to be manipulated, and that drastically increases the overall requirements of what you're going to need to not only handle and render that scene, but the amount of time it's going to take for that to render. And that's also why most video games don't really use true displacement for anything. Most of it's just generally bump displacement, using normal maps and height maps and stuff like that to fake the appearance of depth. So, well, this is cool and all, but that's not it's not what my ceiling looks like. I don't know about you. I mean, I guess if I lived in a cave, my ceiling might kind of look like this, but yeah, it's not what my ceiling looks like. So the first thing I want to do is increase its scale like a whole bunch. Like, let's try 100. Ooh, that's pretty good. I mean, I kind of like that, but I mean, if this was a ceiling, then that's really big texture. You know, if this room was like 10 foot by 10 foot, then that is huge texture on the ceiling. So, yeah, we should probably go bigger with the scale. Let's try 200. Ooh, that's getting better. It's getting quite a bit better. I think it still needs to be a bit smaller, though. So let's go 250. Yeah, I like that. That's pretty good there. Something I don't like about it, and it might just be because I've had experience with it, like spraying the texture and working drywall and horrible jobs like that, but it's really flat on top. Like, I want the ceiling, where the ceiling is and the texture isn't sprayed in, to be flat, but I don't want the texture to be flat like that on top. Now, texture on walls oftentimes is pretty flat like that. After they go in and spray the texture on walls, you go back through with sanding blocks and just do a quick sand on it to knock off all the sharp edges and surfaces. Granted, if I saw this, I'd laugh at the guy thinking he'd way over sanded. But yeah, so I don't want this flatness. Like, all of these raised pieces like raise up, but then they're perfectly flat on top. Well, what controls that is the difference between the white and the black. Right now, black, well, like if we open this way back up like that, the more black we have, I missed it. The more black we have in the environment, the more, well, in a sense, it almost looks like we don't have as many of these, but that's because the ceiling, the whole environment itself is actually raising up to the maximum highest level that they can be. And because of that, it covers them all up. So the more black, the more elevation we have to things. The more white, the more we flatten out the top of it like that. So if right here, where was it? About there, I believe. Yeah, if right here, if we're too flat on top, well, that simply means we need to bring that white further up, therefore not cutting off the limit at which the top is going to be at. I think I had my black a little bit further up, though. Maybe not, but yeah, I want it about like that. Alright, so, well, there's the beginnings of our roof texture. That's actually, or ceiling texture, sorry. That's actually pretty good. However, I don't like how much empty space there is. Now, I could bring this black down and fill that back up, but that's just getting to be too much, you know, and I want them to be in little pieces like this. I like the little pieces. It adds to the natural looking appearance of, what my ceiling looks like, but I want them, more of them. Well, instead of playing around with that till I go crazy and messing with the scale of this, trying to get just the right size of pieces and the right amount of them and everything like that, how about I just add some more pieces? So let's grab a noise texture and let's grab another one of these and let's plug the factor in just like that. And let's scoot this out. Let's grab us a math node. Ooh, not a math node. I want a color mix node. Honestly, I don't know why my preference is on the color mix node. Probably because I have a mix factor. Whereas with a math node, and like I can add with both of them, but I don't have a mix factor on that one. And actually, I don't want to add anyways. I just want to mix them together. So let's bring you up and plug you into the bottom. So now that's the top and that's the bottom. And if you don't see a change, well, that's because we have identical setups right here. So let's bring this one up to 300 instead of 250. So now that's different. And right away, you'll see now we have more of them. However, we're not having them both at the same time. And that's kind of unfortunate. And if we go half and half, yeah, they're both there, but they're not full strength. They're just kind of partially there, I guess. So what I want to do is I want to mix them together so that, let's scoot these back a pinch. Scoot that over, and yeah, about there's fine. So I want them to be mixed together so that these ones and these ones are showing up full strength. Well, let's see what these look like real fast. Like if we cut this displacement node off and plug these into our diffuserator, we can see what the actual image creating these bumps looks like. Oh, there we go. That's what that one looks like. And as you can see, now it's black is low and white is high because we're getting our raised spots where that white is. So right now, black is down, white is up. So this is this spot. One more time. And then this one. Pretty much the same thing with a slightly different scale, thus causing them to be in slightly different spots. So same thing, black is up, white is down. Sorry, white is up, black is down. And yeah, you can see how that white-black information directly translates into the manipulation of that surface. So I want to mix these two together, but I want them to both show up at the same time. Well, there's a super easy way to do that. Now, if you remember right, let's cut that back off. In the last episode, we actually used a black and white image to control the factor of a mix node. Well, we can do the same thing again. If we remember, black being 0 is all the top input, and white being 1 is all the bottom input, then basically all we need to say is that wherever this one, this image here, the one that's in the top, is wherever this image is white, we want it to show up. And wherever this bottom image is white also, because that'll be its tall parts, wherever this one is white, we want that to show up. However, that could be complicated, but we're really lucky in the sense that no matter which one we're looking at, this one pretty much has black everywhere that this other one, that this other one has white. So there's not a lot, well, I mean, there's going to be some spots overlapping where white is on white, but not a lot of spots. So all we have to do is we plug these in like that, and see if we plug this up here, scoot this back. These are our two different sets of spots. So yeah, where most of them are black, or where most of one is black, the other one is that's where its white spots are. There's not, sorry, not a whole lot of overlapping white spots. So that means that we can actually use the output of one of these in order to control what we see and what we don't see. Let's check if the bottom one will work. So where the bottom one is white, we want its white spots to show up. And where the bottom one is black, we want the other spots to show up, right? Well, that means that if we plug this color output up into here, then everywhere this image is white, it's going to be showing this one, the bottom one, which is what we want. And everywhere that this image is black, it's going to be showing this top option, which will let the white from this one in the other spots through, just like we want. So if we take this color output and plug it into the top there, now we have both spots. So let's unplug that real fast. So like we have these spots right here, and then this big patch and this big patch. So again, this big patch, that big patch, and then this little line of spots here. Plug that in, and we have this little line of spots which actually disappears right here because this patch is over the top of it, and then this big patch right here. So we now have both sets. And you may notice that some of these are a little dimmer, that the one set looks brighter than the other set, but that's because these aren't exact duplicates of each other, I do not believe. Or maybe they are. They are exact duplicates. Well, then its difference is going to fall down to the difference of scale. So if we go 255, so almost identical scale. No, honestly, well, yeah, no, okay, now that it's sampled up to 32, yeah, that's pretty much the exact same grayscale and brightness as that. So yeah, the only reason these are getting dimmer is because they're getting smaller, back to 300. But there we go, now we have both of them put together. So if we take that off of our diffuse shader and plug it into our displacement, now we have even more flooring, or texture going on our ceiling. Still a little empty for my preference though. Ooh, let's add a different texture into it. And that's simple enough. Let's grab our mix shader here, or sorry, our mix RGB node, our color node, and hold shift and press D to duplicate it. And let's just drop it in line after the one that was already there. And just like the one that was already there, this has the same function. 0 on its scale is whatever's coming into this top input. 1, or so not scale, factor. 1 on its factor is whatever's coming into this bottom input. So it works just the same. Well, we've used two noise textures. Let's add ourselves in something different. How about a moose growl texture? These are fun textures, lots of settings. I still suck with them, but hey, fun texture, lots of settings. All right, so already you can see kind of a wobbly pattern going on. Let's throw a color ramp in there and tighten that up so we can get a better idea of what we have going here. Open that back up, bring you down. Wow, it's really, that color ramp really had an effect, didn't it? Yeah, that color ramp just without any changes made to it pretty dramatically changed the appearance of that material, or that texture. Crazy. I don't play with the moose graph texture nearly enough. One of the guys in the I think maybe one even the creator of the Blender Procedural Textures group in Facebook swears by him. And honestly, seeing some of the stuff he's made, yeah, I really should learn more about this particular texture node. It's so complicated. I haven't spent a whole lot of time with it. But here we go. Let's increase our scale. Getting close. That's pretty close to the size of the other stuff, right? Oh, still really big. Let's go just straight to 200. Yeah, that'll be close enough. Alright, well, let's add some detail really flatten that out. You know what, let's add a little bit of extra detail. Just add a couple little flat spots. Just something that might catch the light a little bit more. Because, I mean, your texture on your ceiling's probably painted. And, paint, well, everything technically has a little bit of reflective quality to it. So, yeah, might as well have a couple little flat spots that just might catch the light. Dimension? I didn't really have much of an effect. Sorry, I really don't ever use this node. Alright, luminosity. Ooh, it's kind of making them like wiggle and worm around until they got huge. Well, because of what we're after, I think a high luminosity would probably be better. It's like adding more of the pitted, lumpy kind of detail to them. Like if I bring that back down, these lumps get bigger and bigger until I bring it far enough down that they pretty much kind of smooth out. So yeah, pretty high to give it kind of that ripply texture. Now, mind you, if you're actually that close to your ceiling texture, well, you definitely want a lot of detail in it, but at the same time, that's not something likely to really happen very often. All right, so there we have it. That was simple enough. Oh, let's offset. Seems to be having a very, very subtle manipulation on the shaping of the texture itself. Let's go ahead and just drop that back to 0 and gain. Yeah, not really seeing much anything. That's okay. And then, of course, we can play with our slider and reduce the amount of the bump, or really bring it up flat. It's a jigsaw. But yeah, so as always, we can play with this color ramp and manipulate it that way. Oh, I suppose this is as good a time as any. You know what? We'll go over that in just a sec. Actually, the color ramp actually does something to the way your information is processed that's really handy and can be used in a lot of ways. But we'll get to that in just a sec. So here we go. On one side we have, oh wow, yeah, I still need to go tinier. Let's go 300, 500. That might be better. Yeah, 750. There we go. And let's reduce its amount like that. Alright, and what we're going to do is we're going to mix that together the exact same way as the last one, because we know everywhere that this isn't is going to be black in that image. If we plug that in up there, everywhere that these bumps are is going to be black, or 0. So everywhere that these bumps aren't, if we use this as a factor, if we plug this in here, Everywhere that those bumps were not, it's going to send this top value through, the 0 option. And everywhere that the bumps were, it'll send the bumps through. So we go ahead and plug that into our factor, and there we go. That's quite a bit better. However, now the importance of the color ramp and how it manipulates your formulas. And as you can see, we got 3 of them chilling right here, so it'd probably be a good idea to understand what it's changing. So let's scoot this out a little further and just add another one of these mixed nodes in. Again, 1 is everything we've done so far. 0 is this bottom input. Yeah, we'll come back up here so it's easy to see what we're doing. Let's grab ourselves another texture, and this time let's go to, I'll probably say this wrong every single time, a Voronoi texture? Yeah, I don't know how it's pronounced. It's got a weird name. Anyway, let's plug that in there, and if we zoom out, you can see what it's doing right there. A little easier to see if I turn its scale up a bit. So here's what it's doing. It's got, well, it's kind of nifty looking. We bring this back here, run this factor up to there. And yeah, so this one's actually, the way it looks in any ways, it almost looks inverted of what we were just working on a minute ago. Because where this one is black, it looks like it's actually taller, and where it's white, looks like the valleys or crevices in between. So this one's actually looking rather backwards from our other one. And that's why I said currently when I was working on that front one, as far as currently white is this and black is that. Because it tends to go back and forth, I've seen. Anyhow, so this is what we have right here. Well, we plug a color ramp into that, and I guess, well, yeah, no, I'll put the color ramp in and then plug it back in. Color ramp. And plug you back in, and we can actually unhook you. So this is what we have. And yeah, just like we went over in the first lesson, as we bring this up, we increase the amount of black in the image and reduce the amount of area for gray and white. As we bring this down, we increase the amount of white in the image and decrease the amount of room left in the image for gray and black. And if we bring them close to each other, we can increase both white and black and decrease the amount of gray, also known as the space in between them, that is available. So just decrease the amount of gray, because now there's only gray in that percentage of the image, whereas that percentage is black and that percentage is white. Well, this slider here also happens to represent a numerical scale. And this is where displacement, as far as using color maps, or honestly about anything you can do with color maps, this is where it gets really intense. Even more so intense than like using math to manipulate all your values and stuff, because now you can add a really easy way to manipulate your math values or your number values to produce a large variety of options. So this bar here, this black to white bar, this technically represents 0 to 1. Because this texture, remember, it's sending out numbers for every single spot on the image between 0 and 1. Because it's sending those out, this bar can then take that number and pick a location on it and then feed out for that spot the corresponding color information, or in our case, black and white, 0, 1 information for our displacement. Well, why do you jump on me like that? Okay, there we go. So because this basically equals 0 and this equals 1, then technically the orientation of these, in a sense, can be manipulated to our own benefit. Now, a great example of that is currently, say, this is sending information for, like this spot right here, and it's sending out 0.05. So the bar goes, oh, 0.05, that's really close to black, that's almost black. Give that dot on the screen this color right here that's at 0.05 on a 0 to 1 scale. And then it looks at this spot right here, and it's like, oh wow, that's really bright white. it sends the number in because, well, because the number coming out of this going into here or whatnot for this spot is going to be like 0.9, the color ramp's going to be like, all right, 0.9. Well, that's right about here, so send white out for that spot. But that means that because this represents 0, and I mean this side of the bar, not this black tab, and this represents 1, again, this side of the bar, not the white tab, well, that means that, sure, 0 can be black, but what do you say we grab this one and drag it to right there, and then we come up here to this plus and minus sign and click plus. And that added another one in between the active one that you have selected and the next one closest to it to the left, I believe. So we're just going to drag that all the way to that other side, all the way to this end where the 1 value on the slider is, and we're going to drop this down to black. And that's not very centered. Oh, let's try that again, 0.5. Yeah, you can also control the position of these tabs with this number here, this position. And again, it's a 0 to 1 scale. So now, this is sending information in, and anything that's really close to 0 is appearing black. Anything in between 0 and 1 is this faded scale to gray-white. But then you'll notice our cracks, the very, very centers of our cracks, have gone dark. And that's because now, where this texture was sending out 1 and we were getting white, we're now getting back towards black. So if we can bring this down and bring this up a little, oh, missed. Bring this up a little bit. Yeah, bring that down further. Yeah, that's the better representation of it. So yeah, now as I bring this down closer to the 1, you can see those used to be bright white. But that's not because this was saying, hey, make those white. This Voronoi texture was just saying, hey, that spot's 1, that spot's 0.99, that spot's 0.97, so on and so forth. It was just giving them a numerical value out of this factor input. And because this bar is 0 to 1, we then pick what that numerical value is represented as. Right now, because we're doing displacement, we got black and white, but it can be any color you want on these color ramps, and you can use as many of these tabs as you'd like. Oh, I just put a bunch in there. Scoot you down, scoot you down. Oh, no, let me grab it because there's more on top. There's still more on top. Okay, there's no more on top. So yeah, you can make each one of these a different color. You can manually set them at exactly whatever position you want them to be at. And then yeah, this texture is simply sending 0 to 1 values out. So your color ramp can then take those 0 to 1 values and assign them specific colors. Let's just go ahead and delete this color ramp and put a new one in here real fast. Another feature behind these color ramps is the fact that it doesn't have to be this perfect gradient. So if we put you at 5, oh no, I said put you at 5, and then let's add another one. Oh, why? Oh, it's because I put it at 5 and not 0.5, whatever. Because that one was all the way at that end and that one was all the way at that end. When I added this one with the add button, it put it exactly in the middle between the two, which happens to be at 0.5. However, I want 2 more. This one needs to be at 0.25, and oh, that went right on top of the other one, of course it did, so 0.75. That one was already at 0.25. So now, let's go ahead and make this one black, and let's make this one hey, come on now. Let's make this one black, and let's make these 2 white. Oh, and also when it adds it, not only does it put it directly in the middle of whatever 2 it's going to line up with, it also assumes a color that is an exact 50-50 mix of those 2. So let's make this one white. And now if we plug this back in up there, oh, that was a bad miss. Look at that. Now basically, well, here, let's go back to the original. That was the original. So it was just a tile-like grid of black to lighter towards the seams. Everywhere it's going towards the seams, it gets lighter, and in the middle of its tiles, it's black, or closer to dark anyways. So yeah, basically we've taken this spot here in the middle and said, okay, you can stay black. But then we've come a little ways out to where these numbers are reaching like 0.25, and we're like, all right, you need to be bright white. And then we came a little bit further out to where they're at like 0.5, and we're like, all right, you need to be solid black again. And we just kept alternating. About 0.75, we want you to be white, and at about 1 or whatnot, we want you to go back to black. So we're taking the original numerical value represented by this black-white and converting it into our own mixture of colors. So yeah, if we go back to that, and there we have it. We said, oh, you could stay dark in the middle, but then a little ways out, you need to get brighter. And then you could go back to your normal, and then you need to get brighter, and then back to your normal, and then you need, so we just determined, we picked where it was going to have its colors. Now, if we cut that off there and come back into, oh, it's right there. Come back into this displacement with our mix. That's the effect we now have. We literally have a surface where it's depressed and then coming up and then it's depressed again. So we can get a lot of manipulation out of how we make this surface appear by playing with our color ramp. And then there's also other options, like if we zoom in on this, you can see how thick this black band is right here. And then over here, there's basically a pure white band to match this pure black band going up out of this white indicator. And it's a very, very small, it's a very small band, just like this black one is very small. And then everywhere between this white, this pure white, and this pure black is a perfect linear mixture. If you came exactly halfway between the two, you would find an exact perfect 50-50 mix of the two different colors. You come over here to 25% away from the black side, 75% away from the white side, and you're going to find that this color right here is like 75% black with 25% white mixed into it. You've moved, 25% of the way towards white. All the way over here at 75% of the way away from black and towards white, you'd find that this color has about 25% black and 75% white. It's this nice linear gradient. They're referred to as the interpolation, the rate at which one mixes or changes to another. Well, we have options for our interpolation. We have linear, which is currently set to constant, B-spline, cardinal, and ease. Now, ease is pretty much the easiest to well, that and constant. But ease, as you saw when I switched to ease, this white section here, or sorry, this black section here, as well as the black sections on the sides, and the white section above each of these actually got bigger. I'll switch back so you can see them shrink, and then I'll switch back to ease so you can see them grow. What ease does is grants more range of the pure color, of the color that is assigned to the tab out each side of that tab, and then it's a somewhat quicker mix as it occurs in between the two tabs. So we get more pure white and more pure black, but less of a gray mix as it goes through. Cardinal's very similar, however, Cardinal's really strict with the color gradient at the edges. If you watch when I change from ease to cardinal, you'll see that this black and that these two white don't really change much. However, the amount of black that's creeping in on these sides will change quite dramatically. I'll switch back so you can see that again and one more time. So yeah, cardinal's a lot like ease. It just tends to be a lot stricter with the color bleeding in from your very endpoints, as far as at least what I've found. Constant is exactly what it says, and it moves from left to right. So if I switch to constant, you can see that we have this very farthest left node, and it is set to black, and then all of this bar is 100% pure black, going from left to right until it reaches the next little tab in here. And then that tab is set to white, so we now have this constant white. There's no longer a gradient, no longer a mix. It's just constant color. So yeah, it's pretty easy to understand. And in this situation, you no longer need this one at the end. It's not really doing anything for you because this white is constant until it hits that tab, and that tab is all the way at the end. One sec, take a drink. Refreshing. Anyway, so yeah, it's not really needed to have this one at the end on constant, but that's just another one of the options that you can mix. And you can see over here the different effects that are happening. I mean, this is constant, and that looks nothing like what we started with. Here's the cardinal, and I like the appearance of shadow that gives in those dips right there. It's really, really accentuating the false appearance of depth with that shadow. E should be similar, but again, just slightly different. And then linear is what we started on. And then the last one in the option is B-spline. And B-spline kind of takes away all of your pure color sections and gives you a much softer gradient of just all of your colors mixed together. So you can see we're still getting lighter in color as we come towards the white ones and darker in color as we come towards the black ones, but we've completely lost the pure original color associated with that tab. And that one's B-spline. I tend to use linear, constant, and ease most of the time just because they're easy to work with. But yeah, so that's how effective and all the different ways that a color ramp can manipulate these displacement values. And we'll get into other methods of using color ramps to manipulate the actual pattern for the materials that we produce, the actual pattern of the texture and stuff like that. But yeah, when it comes to the displacement option, color ramps are still very, very powerful, and it's important to know, how they work and to understand that prospect that, yeah, this is a bar full of colors, but it's also representing a 0 to 1 scale, and that all these default textures and a lot of the other things you work with in Blender in these nodes are also sending information in and out on those 0 to 1 scales. So we can make all this stuff work together for our own benefit. And you know what, let's go ahead and bring this down over here. Set that like that. And let's increase you to like 250. Alright, and let's see what you got going on. Okay, so let's go up more, like 500. It's getting closer. 750. That's better. And now I'm actually going to play with this a little bit, like let's switch you over to hue, saturation, and value, and let's bring the value to like 0.5. And same thing for you, 0.5, not 5, 0.5. And same thing for you. Basically, I'm just going to try and take a lot of the hard sharpness out of it. And then you, let's come down to 0.75. And same thing with you. Let's come down to, what was I doing? Yeah, 0.75. And honestly, that didn't have nearly as much of an effect as I was hoping for, but that's okay. Ooh, cells. No. I mean, I could think of a lot of things that would work for, but ceiling isn't really one of them. Well, hey, okay, so like the cave earlier, maybe I live in a desert cave. That could be my ceiling. Oh, no, intensify. Yeah, so let's see. Let's get rid of some of you guys, and let's set you back to black, and let's set you to white. Alright, as you can see, by default, it's like sunken down. That's the opposite of what I want. I could pick you and set you to white, and then pick you and set you to black, or I got this little double arrow thing right here that will literally switch, just reverse the position of all the tabs you have on your bar. So I can just switch that over, and now instead of being sunken down in, it's got this weird bubbly surface appearance. Nope, I don't want big flat spots on top. I want fewer bubbles. There we go. There's fewer bubbles. Now, I might be able to drastically distort these bubbles if I come in here, grab a texture node, and I want noise texture. We're going to plug the factor into the vector on those. Yeah, no. I need my advanced mapping node. We'll go over that in lesson number 4. And if you see that and think that's really cool, don't worry. We're going to go over how to play with vectors to really make some crazy textures in lesson 4. But in between lesson 3 and 4, you'll have to watch my tutorial for advanced mapping nodes so that you have the mapping node I use. Don't worry though, I'll remind you in the video. So anyhow, back to what we were doing. We got these little speckle things, these little lumpy balls, and if I drop that down to there, yeah, they're like perfect size for what I want. So let's see if I get a decent effect by just doing the same thing we've done so far. Yeah, no, I still feel like there's too many of them. Let's bring that down like that, maybe. Yeah, just something like that. Now let's try and control the factor on that. Yeah, that's much better. That might even be a little too small, but yeah, just the little speckles that are in there. So yeah, let's make you just a little bit bigger. And then I want one more set of those speckles, but offset from where those ones are. So we're going to do the exact same thing we did at the beginning with these two. And I'm just going to duplicate those. And we're going to duplicate this mix RGB node. And I'm going to plug that into the bottom. And I'm also going to plug it into the factor. And then I'm just going to change this scale. Say 700. There we go. So now we got even more of the little dots. And there you go. Spin this around like that. And there you have your ceiling texture. Just like looking up in your room or something. And the really unique quality behind this is, as I said, it's like the other half of your materials. That's not even the material. There's no color to it. There's no pattern to it. There's nothing there but the faked appearance of depth. However, when it comes to a lot of your materials, the appearance of depth makes up almost as much of what you see as the actual color and brightness and everything like that of the material. That illusion of your 2D texture not actually being 2D. And yeah, that's why we spent all of lesson 2 covering this one little input on the material output. And there's still many, many more things. Just like lesson 1, we kind of only covered the basics. I mean, here you go. We have 2 noise textures with slightly different scales. A moose grave texture that I didn't understand half of what I was doing with because I need to learn more about that texture. And then 2 of the Voronoi. Again, slightly different scales. And we've just added one to the next in a line, and we've used the second one that we're adding to make sure that to control the factor on our mix shader so that this one appears and this one only appears in the spaces that this one isn't using. And then even though we had combined both of these, when they come out of here, it's just one. It's just one image. So we can do the exact same thing over and over again. You know, this image and this image. Well, we want this image to appear, and we want this image to appear everywhere this image isn't. And then again, we want this image to appear, and then we want this image to appear everywhere this one isn't. Because even though we have all 3 of these textures combined at this point, when they come out of this mix RGB, it's just one picture. So our very first picture was that. And we'll cut that displacement off and just look at that. So yeah, that was our very, very first picture. And then our second picture was our first picture plus our second picture. Our third picture, our second texture, our third picture, again, was a combination of the ones that came before it, and basically each time we're just adding extra little white dots. And then our fourth picture, and then our fifth picture. And yeah, each time we're just adding more and more little white dots. And then all of that black and white information, that basically ones and zeros and everything in between, gets translated into simulated depth. Now, like I said, there is true displacement where it actually manipulates the vertices of the mesh to create texture. But could you imagine the amount of vertices you would need on a mesh in order to simulate, like actually be able to manipulate the mesh and provide that texture? It's not worth it. You're looking at millions and millions and millions of vertices for one single plane, for a piece of ceiling in a bedroom scene or a living room scene. It's just not worth it. So this simulated, this false displacement or whatnot, this is where it's at, and it really adds a beautiful quality to almost any material you produce. Again, unless it's for like a toon shader and you want it to look completely flat. And then, yeah, for this, we don't even really need color at all. We have a diffuse shader, which represents our flat white. The only other thing I'm going to throw in here, and mind you, again, this is simple, things could get a lot more complicated, but I'm going to throw a glossy shader in. Because as I said before, pretty much everything has reflection. Even, particularly like the paint that you're going to throw up on the ceiling most likely has a reflective quality. Well, not most likely, does. Pretty much everything in existence has some form of reflection. And to mix these together, if you remember from the first episode, green spots are special. We pretty much only ever, and I mean like really, really only ever, use green spots with other green spots. So because we want to mix two shaders together, we go into our shader category, and there's actually a mix shader node that we can use. And we can plug those two in together, and as you can see, we got really shiny, like way too shiny. And yeah, just like the color, the RGB mix node, all the way to 1 on the factor is going to be whatever shader's in the bottom. All the way to 0 is going to be whatever shader's on the top, and in between is a mix of the two. So as I bring this up, we get shinier and shinier, and as I bring it down, we go back to that flat white that we started with. Now you can sit here and try and play and try and get just the right amount. Like that's a pretty good bit of shine, just like where bright light's hitting it, and the rest of the roof's not too bad, except occasional little highlights where we put those flat spots on those bigger pieces. You know, nice little look to the ceiling there. But the easiest way to probably control the mixture between diffuse and glossy, especially if well, you know what? Honestly, it's not bad. It gives a decent appearance to things, and in a sense, it's trying to emulate realism. But it's to control this factor adjustment with one of the various input node options that are available. So if we open our node options up and go to the input category, you can see there's a lot to choose from. And a lot of these can actually be used to control the factor as well as other values on different nodes you're using. And, like one that's really cool is the light path node. Whoa, where'd it go? There it is. Let's click. And as you can see, this will actually allow you to control things based on what type of light ray or light path is interacting with the dot or whatever your material. And so yeah, is transmission ray, reflection, singular, glossy. You can basically tell certain things to be controlled simply depending upon what kind of light is hitting them. Is this light that's bounced off an object and it's glossy light, so on and so forth. So yeah, that's really cool. There's a couple different options. The one we're going to be using is the Fresnel node. There it is. And this basically allows you to control the balance between glossy and not glossy based on the index of refraction of a particular material. Now, if I remember right, paint is probably going to be somewhere right around between 1.4 and 1.6 or so. So let's go like 1.5. 1.52. 55. And yeah, as you can see, as we go lower, we're actually getting more and more of the glossy You can even see the borderline. Right here, it's actually going from a lot heavier glossy to a lot heavier flat matte. And the index of refraction basically determines how much of the glossy you see based on a couple of variables. Primarily your angle to the surface, like where you're looking at the surface, in regards to where the light is also bouncing off of the surface. So if I come up here and look pretty much straight down on it, well, the light's bouncing at a sharp angle, so the light that's bouncing off the surface isn't really bouncing directly at me, so I don't really get a whole lot of reflection off of it. However, if I come down here to an angle in which the sun is more so bouncing off of it and then like straight up into my eyes, or in this case, our viewing window, aka the camera or whatever, because we're at that angle, we get much more of that reflective quality out of it. The Fresnel node's really easy to use when it comes to controlling the balance between diffuse and glossy. If you're curious about it, I don't remember what the name of the video was, but Blender Guru did a video talking about Fresnel, the Everything Has Fresnel video or whatnot. Again, I don't remember what the name of the video was, but let's be honest, it's Blender Guru. You can Google it. Trust me, you'll find it. But so yeah, there we go. There's our second lesson on procedural textures, and today we covered the displacement side of things. Next video, we're going to talk about the volume and volumetrics, and then from there, it'll be learning how to incorporate 2 or 3 of the different aspects of our material output to produce materials that might actually be used, and learning new ways to combine the nodes and different ways to manipulate the math and stuff like that in order to get the effect that you want, to produce the texture that you see in your head. Basically, any texture you can imagine, you can create with nodes. However, the hard part is getting what's in your head, that beautiful, perfect picture, onto the screen and looking the way you want. And a lot of that just falls down to your understanding of how the nodes work and all the different ways that they can work together. So yeah, hopefully you are continuing to learn from this. Hopefully this video was helpful to you. And yeah, again, next video we'll go over volumetrics, or at least the basics, like so far we've just been covering the basics. And then in video 4 we'll start incorporating some of these together and starting to make more complex materials. Alright, well until then, as always, good luck with any projects you might be working on, and yeah, I hope you found it helpful. Any questions or comments, just go ahead and drop them down in the comment section below. And yeah, and until the next video, enjoy creating things your way.